Welcome to the wild world of trial and error entrepreneurship. It's FounderQuest time.
Yeah, talking about pitches for our dev cycle. We were talking about that in our shape up cycle that we're following, and I'm really liking the 6-week thing where we work on stuff for 6 weeks and then we cool down for a couple weeks. I really like how that puts us in a good shipping pattern. I think our shipping cadence we've seen lately, like we're just getting stuff out there, and that's nice. We've modified it a little bit for our process because we're not, Basecamp is a relatively, or 37 Signals is a relatively small company, but we are teeny tiny. And so the one thing about the shape up process that I'm currently feeling uncomfortable with is the whole design, the pitch bit. Because like you and I are pretty much deciding what we're going to be doing, and then we do it, So it's like, well, what is the pitch really like when it's a company of just 5 people? It's like, well, we all know what we want to do, so do we really need to pitch it?
But do we know what we want to do? I think that's the struggle for me, is like we sometimes get into the cycle and we spin our wheels a little bit trying to figure out like, okay, where does this feature go? And I think the idea of the pitch is that it's not like a top-down design, but it's also not just like this is the whatever user story or what we're trying to solve, but it's like somewhere in between. It's a little bit like a wireframe, or like sketching out the limitations of the feature and thinking through the general like UI concerns of where the feature is going to fit in the app and those sorts of things, so that you're not like spending a week or two in a like discovery phase of trying to figure out, okay, what does the UI look like? How much can we actually fit into this feature in the next 6 weeks? I think that's the really useful part of the pitching process, thinking through the UI, having some wireframes to go off of.
Yeah, I'm definitely a big fan of doing a little bit of design, not a big design up front. I guess I'm just a little, to me, a pitch feels like I have to sell the rest of the team on we're going to do this idea, right? And I think if I know where the product needs to go, then do I really need to pitch the team on that? I don't know. Do I need to get consensus, or am I just the benevolent dictator?
Right. Well, maybe we need a different word for it, because I think we are using it less as like, we don't really have a competition problem for the most part, because it's mostly you and I that are coming up with these, and sometimes Kevin.
Right.
And the 3 of us are usually on the same page, and we're all talking about these things anyways. So I think we're already convinced in the sense that like these are all things that we would like to do. And if there's any decision to be made, it's what do we want to do first? In that sense, I think also it's useful to have each potential cycle fleshed out a little bit, so we can see like, does this fit? Is this a good fit for now? Like, it's important to think through, especially if you're like limiting yourself to 6 weeks. I think there's value in thinking through how much you can accomplish up front.
Yeah, for sure. We're still, I think, biting off a little bit more than we can chew for individual cycles. And so we get, like right now, we're halfway through our current cycle. And it's like, well, are we going to get this done in 3 weeks? Does it really feel like it's going to happen?
Right. And also like thinking through the UI specifically has benefits, I think. And sometimes it changes how the feature, like how we build the feature or what we choose to do. And sometimes thinking through that upfront a little bit sparks a new idea that we might not have had before if we had just like sat down and started coding. I think that's the struggle for us, like as developers who built a lot of this product, and we're used to just having an idea and jumping straight into the code, and we figure out the UI as we go along. But I think our UI has evolved, the product has evolved to the point where there's like so much going on that if we don't start thinking through some of these things from a product vantage point, then we risk having this jumbled UI. It's not intuitive and simple like what we want to give to users. But yeah, we're very good at like having an idea and like building like a technical feature that fits well into the product. But I think like thinking through the actual user experience and like how, the other aspects of it is where we're a little bit weaker. And I think that like Shape Up can help with that potentially. It's just developing that muscle to sit down and talk through those things. And I mean, I definitely don't like doing, I don't want to plan everything out up front either. I prefer an agile style, but I think Shape Up strikes a nice balance between like waterfall and agile design.
Yeah, I guess maybe we just need to have a regularly scheduled meeting that is the planning for the next cycle kind of thing, because like we're not doing that as much today. So yeah, that'd probably be helpful.
Yeah, it's not even wireframes. It's really like sketches. Like I think they talk about that in the book. It's like this isn't set in stone, and it's definitely not even like the design could change, but it helps us give a general idea of where we're going, and hopefully eliminate some of the roadblocks that we get into if we're like where we get stuck on talking about the design, and then a week later we resolve that, but now we're a week out of our cycle or whatever.
Right. Well, you and Kevin are going to try something different for Honey Badger in general. You're going to get together and actually work together in person for a day.
Yeah. Kevin and I, this will be our our third hangout recently. We were actually just like hung out 3 days last week at Monitorama in Portland here at the open source monitoring conference, one of our favorites. So we saw a lot of each other last week, but we've been trying to get together and do some co-working lately this year. I figure like, why not? We're like relatively close to each other. If we both meet in the middle in Portland, it's like a 15-20 minute drive for each of us, I think. So that's been cool. And it's useful for things like this. On Thursday, we're going to talk through a design thing, see if we can come up with some ideas. So I think that'll be useful.
We're 12 years into this remote working thing. And while there have been many benefits to that approach, I do increasingly lately miss being in person with the team and, just hanging out and making stuff happen on the whiteboard and stuff like that.
You feeling a little jealous up there?
Yes, I am.
Yeah,
actually.
I wish you could be down here too. You got to move to Vancouver like you've talked about.
Yeah, totally. Gonna get my wife on board with that plan. But I could just head down there. I could fly down for the day, or the Seattle to Portland flight is pretty easy.
Yeah, we should do that sometime.
I am looking forward to getting together in September when we're all together for Rails World. And hopefully we can get some time in there. But when you and I were at RailsConf, that was a lot of fun to be able to design some stuff and think about something. So, yeah, in person good, even if remote is also good.
Yeah, I really enjoy the in-person times we get to hang out and work together.
So you've been really hot on getting some changes to our internal setup that will help us in our product design. You want to talk about your motivations for what I've been doing lately?
Should I introduce what your little project has been?
Yes, you should.
You've wanted to do this for a while, but I've been really pushing you for my own reasons. I think my reasons have been different. But okay, so Ben is working on some infrastructure for an EU, a European Union region for Honey Badger, which will give us like our European customers will like that because they have like their own whatever regulatory and data siloing, requirements. And that's just like a great thing for us to have. But for me, this will solve an issue that I've noticed, that we have not really been using parts of Honey Badger, especially some of the more recent things, in our own internal workflow or monitoring. And that is because for a long time, we've had our own instance of Honey Badger, like our internal instance. But as these things do, it's a little bit like a staging server, or maybe even not a staging server, but it's like an environment that it's not part of your production stack per se. And I think there's an issue with that sort of environment where if it's not a production thing, it tends to get ignored a little bit. And it's easy to be like, oh, that just doesn't work over there because we haven't gone and done the infrastructure thing that it needs. Like for Insights, for example, we launched the new logging thing, but we didn't get around to adding ClickHouse and setting up the infrastructure on our private internal Honey Badger instance. And we've used Honey Badger for error tracking for years, but it's always been like over here on this rando like environment. And so the problem is we're like behind on the features we've launched, and we don't maintain it as well or as often as we should. And I realize that's probably been a problem for us because if we're not using our product, we're not experiencing the annoyance of various things. I think we're very annoyance-driven developers. That's why we started Honey Badger. And I think it's really important for us to be experiencing any pain that our customers are experiencing using our product so that we can fix that and make it better. And it just, it gives you a good vision for the product if you're using it, as much as possible. I think having this EU region will give us the ability to use Honey Badger more ourselves because we can monitor. The reason we can't use just our main current production stack is we don't want circular dependencies, right?
Right.
And if Honeybadger goes down and we need to troubleshoot it, we can't be like, well, our monitoring is now down because it's monitoring itself. So we need a separate isolated environment. And the benefit of this EU region is that it will be a production environment that we will eventually have customers on, and we will be motivated to maintain just like our main production environment. And these two things can monitor each other, and we can finally have a true production environment for ourselves for our own monitoring needs. And sorry, I just rambled for 5 minutes, but this is something I'm really excited about. About this. I think it'll be a big deal.
Yeah, the secondary system, the staging environment that we've been using for the longest time has been helpful. We've used it for Honeybadger itself, like tracking errors that we trigger. We depend on this environment, and it's been fine until we launched Insights. Because like you said, we didn't end up doing all that infrastructure work over in that staging environment as well. And so it's a few months behind now. And yeah, we're not using Insights on a daily basis like we are the rest of the Honeybadger functionality that we've had over the years. And we're playing with Insights where we use it a little bit in some of our stuff, but it's not a production kind of use case like Honeybadger, like the error tracking. And we've wanted to have an EU stack for a very, very, very long time. It's something that years and years we've been thinking about doing, but it's just been, it's one of those things like, oh yeah, that'd be nice, but it's so much work. It's a heavy lift. And every time I thought about it, it'd be like, well, there's this problem and that problem and this other thing, and I just don't want to solve those kind of problems right now. But with the launch of Insights, it really became clear that having this environment that needs to be kept up to date, basically like a production environment, well, okay, why don't we just make another production environment? And while we're going through that process, why don't we just put it over in the EU? And then we solve two problems at once, right? And I think it was a couple months ago, well, I guess about the beginning of the year or so, as Insights was getting ready to launch, I was like, yeah, I should do this. And I started making some efforts towards cleaning some things up and making some of the deployment more automated, because we're heavy users of Terraform. And, even with that, there are some things that were still manual setup, and this configuration needs to be tweaked in that way, and stuff that was very specific to our current production environment. Things accumulate, cruft accumulates. And so I started going through, okay, I can automate this part, I can bring this into Terraform, but it was just like a nights and weekends kind of project. And then a couple months ago, you're like, no, we really need this because we're not feeling the pain, like you said, our customers, because we're not using this as much as we should be. And so I'm like, all right, boom, I'm doing it. All right, so I'm locked in. And the good news is it's taken less time than I thought it would. And it's gone more smoothly. And we're pretty close to having, it's running now. We're actually kind of get baby steps where it's there, but it's not ready for production use yet.
It sounds like you have better infrastructure code and other things now in the way that you're managing this system. I think we're hopefully going to be able to port some of this back to our main production infrastructure at some point, so to make everything a little bit more standardized and easier to maintain, hopefully in the future, and maybe even deploy into other people's AWS accounts in the future if we wanted to have an on-prem story. Sounds like you're making some strides there.
Yeah, I think we're definitely getting close to being able to do that. I've been keeping a README with this work that I'm doing. So basically, I'm have a new Terraform path, and I just started copying in a bunch of the configuration from our production Terraform stuff and tweaking it from here and there as necessary. And as I was doing that, I noticed, well, here's the thing that we still have to manually do, like setting up the database, right? You can use Terraform to create your database cluster, but it's kind of awkward to have Terraform actually create the logical database and create the users and the tables and so on, the kind of things you do in migrations. So I started, when I realized I was hitting some of these issues, I'm creating Kafka topics, for example, once the cluster is in place. I started keeping track of these things in a README. Okay, every time I'm having to type something or use a UI, what am I doing and how, can I document that? And the good news is that README is very short. Most of the README is, okay, look at this file for this kind of stuff. And there's probably 3 or 4 steps now that are still manual, like the database setup, the topic setup. So yeah, going to a customer now and saying, okay, just run this Terraform config and then we'll help you with these 3 or 4 things. Yeah, we're super close to being able to do that. So I would be delighted to have someone now asking me, hey, can I have this? We've had that question before, and always the answer has been, yes, we can do that for you, but it'll take a bit of work, right? Because I knew there's all these little hidden things, and now all those hidden things are cleaned up. So I'm feeling pretty good about that.
Cool. This little project has had all kinds of network effects or side benefits. That's cool. But yeah, I'm really excited about all of this, but especially that we will be able to finally have a more production experience ourselves with Honey Badger. I think what it really boils down to is if we are telling people that Honey Badger is all you need to monitor your web applications or your SaaS business or whatever it is, and we're not using Honey Badger exclusively to do that, I think that's a problem. And I think we should be using every part of Honey Badger as much as possible. And maybe it turns out that pitch is not quite, or the promise we're making to users in our marketing material or whatever is not quite there yet, and we have a little work to do to get to the point where it really is the all-in-one. I think we're really close, if not there. But I think us using the product more and actually relying on it for everything we do in terms of running Honey Badger in production will really help us make that true. And also it might help us further develop that ethos around monitoring. I think we should be able to tell people how they should be using Honey Badger to achieve these results. Be able to do all this more the observability style monitoring, even with a small team of 4 or 5 people even, or a solo developer. We've had this cycle with Honey Badger where we use it, but then our needs outgrow it a little bit. Mm-hmm. And we go find something Paper Trail or CloudWatch Logs or whatever AWS's thing is, because we're cloud native or whatever you call it. But then we want to use Honey Badger for that. So then we build. Now we have logging and observability in Honey Badger. But now we have a gap of we use CloudWatch for auto scaling. Is Honey Badger going to do auto scaling? And the answer is maybe. So that's maybe someday. But those sorts of things, it forces us to think through that stuff.
Right. And
I think that's important because our customers have the same problems. They're thinking the same thing. Okay, well, I love the simplicity of insights in Honey Badger, but what about we use AWS? So how do we actually connect those events or whatever to our auto scaling rules or whatever? So,
yeah. And, like you said, we're heavy users of AWS stuff like CloudWatch and their insights things. And you can see the influence of that in insights that we've delivered. Because we love that power that comes from those kind of tools, we want to bring those same kind of tools to people who are not tied to AWS, right? If you're running a DigitalOcean droplet, right, why shouldn't you have the same kind of cool tools and not having to go through all the hoops that are required to level up your AWS expertise, right? Because we've spent many, many years becoming very, very familiar with how AWS works, and most people just don't really want to do that. A developer typically just wants to add water, deploy the thing, and be off, right? And not having to learn all the intricacies. And so that's really what we're hoping to do with Insights. And yeah, as you say, as we meet our own needs more with it, then we can honestly go out to people and say, hey, this is really all you need.
I love the way you frame that. If you invest a ton of time and you go and become a certified cloud architect or whatever they call it, and you have all this monitoring set up, CloudWatch is really cool, and Amazon's monitoring, all of their tooling is really great, but it is such a project to learn how to set it up, and it's a lot of work. And what if you could just have that all done for you in a simpler tool that doesn't require that you don't have to go get a certification to understand and set it up and maintain it. Yeah, I think that's our goal with Honey Badger.
Yeah, sounds like you have some more marketing copy you can add to the website there.
So much marketing copy to write. Yeah, that's one of the things I've been working on, is continuing to refine our marketing copy and update pages, and it's a constant ongoing process, but it's been fun. I enjoy that. I think the writing and copy part of it is one of my favorite things to do.
So how are you approaching that with the curse of knowledge, right? We have so much background in our head, so much context in our head. How do you get out of that headspace to write it so that it's interesting to someone who's just coming in cold?
That's a good question. Yeah, I'm a huge note taker and researcher, and I've become more so over the years, but I try to keep notes on things like that. So that's one of the reasons I like going to conferences and talking to people, and especially conference talks, discussing a production issue they had at their company or something. I guess what I used to do when I was like an actual software developer, my notes were actually about the technical details of like, how can we use this? How can we bring this back to Honey Badger and use it in our infrastructure or whatever? These days, I find myself furiously taking notes about like what the problems are that they're experiencing and what is the language they're using to describe this problem, so that I can then come back and then use that in my copy or whatever. So I think that's like really the core of it. And just like talking to customers when we're on support, because we all still rotate on support, and we do developers on support and founders on support. So you and I are constantly in the rotation for handling actual support requests. That's a great place to find what's the actual experience with the product that people are having, like what are they trying to do, and then translate that into marketing copy. Basically talking to people and listening to what other people are saying is the best way that I've found to like figure that out. Because you're right, like we have so much context in our heads that it can become difficult to remember what it's like to be a fresh user or someone who doesn't have Honey Badger, or maybe doesn't have experience with monitoring at all like we do. That's a real challenge.
I found that lately I've been talking more to customers. I've been having opportunities to get in touch with them more. And that's been fantastic for me to see where there are gaps in the UI, or where there are some things that maybe there's not a gap there, but maybe there's just too much friction in how we accomplish a thing. And they'll say, oh, well, I'm having a problem with this. And I'm like, oh, well, just do A, B, and C. And it's like, yeah, but I sit back and I think, well, I mean, it wouldn't be immediately apparent to someone who's not me that you got to do A, B, and C, right? So we need to find a way to make that more clear, or just eliminate those A and B steps and get them straight to C. And it also helped me realize recently I was talking to a customer and they said, well, we got this problem with workflow and I got to look at this over here, then that over there. And I thought, well, this is solved by Insights. And I'm like, well, have you looked at Insights? And they're like, no, I haven't. Don't even know this thing. So it made me remember like a few episodes ago when we were talking about like the 7 times you got to mention it to someone. For someone it's their first time, and for this customer it was the first time, even though like we put it in the UI, even though we sent emails. For this customer, it's like, oh yeah, I haven't looked at that yet, right? I'm like, oh, let's look at that. And so it only took 2 or 3 minutes, and it's like, let me show you this thing, and immediately they got it, and they're like, oh, this is exciting, this is really cool. So I think that helps me come back to say, okay, maybe I need to make a video about this thing, or like the screenshot on the marketing page can be about this, right? To help communicate the value of the tool.
Yeah. And just repeating that, put that all on repeat too, because I think there's probably levels of how checked in people are. And we're fortunate to have this core of Honey Badger users who are really excited about Honey Badger, and they're following us on social media, and they're opening our emails, and they're in our new Discord that we can talk about later, but just like TLDR is we have a new semi-secret Honey Badger Discord that's just like a fun community thing that we've wanted to do for a long time. Basically chat with our friends and users of Honey Badger. So if you want an invite to that, reach out to us. But anyway, yeah, where was I going with that?
We have friends and customers who are really engaged and excited and watching.
Yeah, but then there's a level of users where they like Honey Badger and they're here, they're using it, but they're just trying to get their work done, and it's not like a thing. They're not necessarily fans, or maybe they are, but it's more of a passive thing. And so maybe they see our emails, but they don't open them all the time or whatever. They just skim or whatever. And then there's people that are just like either not using the product regularly, or they just have email overload and they don't like social media, and they're very focused on just getting their jobs done, which is totally fine. But to reach the customers and users of Honey Badger and let them know that things are happening, like it takes a lot of repetition and putting these things in all the places. Like we have the in-app callouts and the product changes announcements, and we do emails and we do social media posts and all these other things. But like that's what you have to do to reach everyone. And even then, sometimes they're like, oh, I didn't know that existed. So you reaching out and talking to people periodically is a great way to not only get feedback on the product, but also let people know how they could be using Honey Badger. It's like a customer success type thing.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, that's the way I've been thinking about it. And we haven't done that much and to my regret now, because I'm really enjoying it. And I'm like, why haven't I been doing this all along? But I think one reason why I haven't been is because we subscribe to things, of course. We have a bunch of SaaS subscriptions that we have for running our business. And I really get annoyed when I have an email in my box and it's like, oh, you have a new account manager from such and such SaaS, and let's get in touch and talk about how you're using our product and see how you can have more success in it. And when I get that email, I'm thinking, oh, you want to sell me on how to use your product more or upgrade to whatever thing, and I just don't care. I'm happy or I'm unhappy either way, and I just don't want to spend more money on you, and I know that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to get me to spend more money on your product. And so I think that was probably like the main thing that kept me away from doing this outreach, because I don't want to be that guy, right? I'm not interested in just selling because I'm not a salesperson. Of course, I'd like people to spend more money on us. I'm not turning away money. I'm a capitalist after all. But that's not my goal, like in reaching out to someone. I really do care, just like Honey Badger really does care, right? I care about that someone's having a good experience with the product. I care that they're not frustrated. And that's like my pitch has been to reach out to customers. It's like, hey, we haven't connected. I'd be happy to hear about whatever is on your mind. Like if you have any frustrations or any questions or any comments, suggestions. And that's been fantastic. I've gotten bug reports that we wouldn't have gotten otherwise because people just had like, oh yeah, while I'm talking to you, this thing has been bugging me. And it's like, oh yeah, we should fix that. And so, 2 days later, it's fixed. And I can go back and tell the customer, hey, it's done. And that's a great feeling. And that's what I love about having these conversations. And then, of course, if Insights comes up, like if it could be solved by that, I'm like, oh, yeah, you should check out Insights. And, by the way, it'll make us more money if you actually subscribe to Insights. That's great. So, of course, that's in there, right? But I go back to what Seth Godin has said about if you have something that you believe offers value to the world, then you should share it with the world, right? You should talk about it. You should bring it to people because, why are you doing this thing anyway if you don't think it has any value to the world? And if it does, then you should tell people about it. It helps them. So I don't know. Maybe that's a soapbox thing. But anyway, I've really enjoyed doing that lately. And hopefully I will get better at doing that and more regularly doing that with people.
I think that's great reasons to be doing this, which is maybe the thing that's held us back, like you said in the past, is we don't want to be like whatever cheesy sales people.
Right.
But like lately I've had a similar outlook about it, and I'll just look at us like consultants, but now we were consultants or whatever in the past. Like we were paid to sit down and talk to people about software and then help them build it in a lot of cases. But we can take that mindset and we can be consultants to our Honey Badger users. And that's a benefit of using Honey Badger too, is the founders are very engaged and want to help you genuinely, like help you level up and solve your problems. And as we've learned a little bit more about sales, and at least if people who are good at sales, I think that's a good sales technique too, is you're not just trying to sell someone on some solution that you may or may not care about, but you're going into these conversations just genuinely curious, like what their problems are and how can you help them solve these problems. Even if the solution is not to use Honey Badger, maybe they're not a good fit for Honey Badger and you can help them get there faster, and you probably have enough experience to point them in the right direction or suggest a solution from your experience. And I think that's something I get a lot of satisfaction out of that. I don't know about you, but I just like helping people, and that's a bonus to us that we get to do this like at a larger scale than when we were just freelancers or whatever. Mm-hmm. So it's a way to, it widens your impact potentially since now we have like, thousands of customers instead of like a few clients or whatever. And hopefully we can help more people. Maybe they will give us more money as a result.
Yeah, it's a win-win, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love this business. 12 years in and I'm still loving it. Still love showing up every day and doing what we're doing.
I think I've been learning a lot this year.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the keys. Like I want to feel like I'm learning and becoming better at what I do. So I think this year I've been feeling that. I think some of the things I've seen us like overcoming some of the challenges we've had in the past around talking to people or sales or marketing or whatever. So
back to this Discord thing.
Discord.
I gotta say I was pretty amused because, like you said, we have talked about this for years, and one of the hesitations that we had was, well, if we have this Discord thing, or I don't know, I think we've talked about doing Slack in the past or whatever. It's like, well, we got to have someone in there because customers are going to be asking for support in there. And do we really want to be on the hook for being available 24/7 in a chat room? And so that we've always said, well, no, we don't want to be on the hook for that, so we're not going to do that. And then you went to Blue Ridge, and you came back and you're like, well, I created this Discord. And I'm like, okay, I guess we have a Discord now.
I was like after Blue Ridge, but I've been wanting to try this, and it got to the point where I was just like, I've thought about this enough, and I'm just going to ship it.
Right.
I'd probably spent too much time thinking about, okay, well, should we use Slack, or should we use Discord, or should we have some discourse forum or something? Finally, I just like Discord seems like it's the obvious like community. Like if you're trying to have a community that is easy for people to join and is like chat based, Discord seems like the platform that has like stuck the most. And I know like Discord overload is a real thing. People are in like, 50, or I know people are like in 100 or more Discord servers. I guess actually making the community useful, and one of the ones that people actually check regularly, will be an ongoing project. And I also think I've signed myself up to be that person in the chat, the community manager or whatever, which is also important, I think, when running these things, is like you need to have someone that is like building the community and all that. Coming back from Blue Ridge, I met a few people, and one of them, Josh, he's a junior, like newer developer. And we had talked about working on some things together with Thomas Cannon, who's kind of mentoring him. And he's working on this game just like for, a learning project. But I was like, it would be fun to have a place where we could chat about this and whatever, continue to keep the conversation going. So that was the opportunity I used to do this. And they were the first 2 users beside myself. But then once I had that, I was like, I should invite more people to this. So I just posted on Twitter and LinkedIn and stuff and Mastodon, like, I have this super secret server, do you want to join? And then I spent like the next week sending people invites, because it turns out like if you actually have an exclusive offer or something, you get a lot of takers. So we have like over, I don't know, 100 to 200 people in there now. I think it's probably like 100, 120 or something, but haven't checked recently. So, and that's just from direct invites and word of mouth. So that was a lot of replies to sift through, but it's fun to do that. It shows you like who's listening or who's paying attention. So maybe we'll open it up to more users.
I'm glad you did it. I think it's fun. I jumped in there, and I'm not in there all the time, but I dip in, I think, at least daily, and check it out. And I think it's cool just to have a place for people who are Honey Badger fans can hang out and help each other or just chat about whatever. I think it's fun.
Yeah, so like the focus of this is, it's not a Honey Badger support channel. That's definitely something. We provide support via email. If you're paying us enough, you can get a Slack integration with us. This is more, let's talk about monitoring and observability. Let's like make ourselves available as those consultants to people to help solve problems and share our experience. And then also there's part of my pitch for this that like people started joining was, let's talk about indie SaaS business, and let's talk about marketing and developers building software and businesses, which sounds a lot like what we talk about on FounderQuest, which is not a coincidence. I think this is also the FounderQuest community. So if you're listening, you should definitely like get in touch with me. Or actually, maybe what I'll do is I'll put a invite link in the show notes. And you should definitely come hang out with us in Discord. And we can talk about episodes and stuff too. So that's a little bit of a extra incentive.
Totally cool.
This is basically like the Honey Badger, the Honey Badger universe community.
So we're going to have our EU stack that we've been talking about for years. And now we've got our community server that we've been talking about for years. So I guess that means we got to do the other thing we've been talking about for years, which is running a community conference.
Oh no. one thing at a time. But yes, that would be fun. I don't know about that one. What I've been trying to do is talk other people into organizing a conference in the Pacific Northwest that I could then be fairly involved in.
Right. Yeah. That sounds like the Honey Badger way, where we, yeah.
I just want to be like the idea person and, let other people do the work.
No, I would be happy to join in on someone running a conference in the Pacific Northwest, and I spend a lot of time doing whatever, mopping the floors or setting up tables. I don't care. But yeah, it would be totally fun to have a community conference, just people that love this kind of stuff hanging out. And I think Monodrama is like that. I think there's some other conferences that are like that, that aren't necessarily tied to one vendor or something. And I think that's one hesitation of, frankly, aside from the complexity and cost of doing a conference, has been we don't want it to feel like a Salesforce conference or some sort of like vendor pitch for 2 days kind of thing. We just want to hang out with cool peeps, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking of, we've talked about doing like an indie business type thing, which would be fun. Also, like, just there's not Pacific Northwest Ruby Conference currently, and that's something that I would love to see happen. If you're listening, Nate, I'm trying to get Nate Vick to organize this. I think he'd just be great at it. But like, yeah, I'd love to volunteer or help co-organize. Like, these sorts of things would be, I think, in our wheelhouse. It's just like with everything else, it seems like a lot to spearhead this. So maybe we'll get there. But I do think it would be cool to, if we had some infrastructure, especially like if we could find a good like event planner to help us, like Xavier who used to organize MicroConf, for example.
Yep.
We need a Xavier.
Yeah. Well, if you are listening to this and you are a budding events planner, event organizer kind of person, and you want to just go wild on a brand new thing, feel free to get in touch. We'll see what we can do.
Yeah, we'll see about that.
Well, cool. Anything else?
I don't think so. I think that's a wrap.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Cool. Well, this has been FounderQuest. Go check us out at founderquestpodcast.com. Go to the show notes for this episode and find your Honey Badger /FounderQuest Discord invite. Join us on Discord, and we'll catch you next time.
FounderQuest is a weekly podcast by the founders of Honey Badger. Zero instrumentation, 360-degree coverage of errors, outages, and service degradations for your web apps. If you have a web app, you need it. Available at honeybadger.io. Want more from the founders? Go to founderquestpodcast.com. That's one word, where you can access our huge back catalog of episodes. FounderQuest is available on iTunes, Spotify, and other purveyors of fine podcasts. We'll see you next week.